Tearing your ACL can separate you from your sport for a significant amount of time. You can go from competing at the highest level to counting quad squeezes. And the weight room, no doubt, can be a significant contributing factor to your rehab process. However, what exercises should you be doing? My name is Joe. I'm the owner and head coach at TKO Athletic Performance. I'm a certified strength and conditioning coach and rehab specialist with over a decade of experience helping athletes return back to the field after ACL injuries. In this video, I'm going to give you the 5 best training exercises to pursue in the weight room after ACL surgery. The weight room is a critical piece of the rehab process, no doubt about it. These exercises are proven, tested, and scalable. So let's get started with number 1. The first exercise on our list is depth jumps. Yes, depth jumps, we're starting aggressive. A lot of ACL rehab protocols and a lot of exercises that are contained within those protocols treat your knee like it's made of glass or a piece of styrofoam. Remember, the goal of training, particularly in the weight room, is to introduce you to the forces and the loads that you may experience out in sport training. The depth jump is one of the few exercises that can replicate or exceed the forces that your body's going to experience while you're training for soccer. In sprinting, cutting, change of direction, jumping, landing, all of the variable movement patterns that you experience in the game put a significant amount of force on the knee joint and the surrounding musculature. So how do we replicate that in the weight room when we don't have the random and chaotic and intense environment like the game of soccer? One of the ways that we do that is the depth jump. The depth jump is a very simple exercise. It seems almost too simple, too good to be true. You bounce off of the ground and you jump as high or as far as possible. That's simple. But the depth jump is such a significant and valuable exercise because of the forces that it places through your feet, through your lower legs, into your knee joints, ligaments, and surrounding musculature. Before we get into depth jumps, it's important to note that the depth jump is not a day one exercise. There is a very clear progression to work towards depth jumps. Most of our athletes that work within the ACL reconditioning program take about 2 to 3 months to build up to traditional depth jumps from an 18 or a 24-inch box. This progression includes things like skipping, pogo jumping, in place and forward. It includes single leg hops, but at a measurable intensity so we can build up to the forces that you're going to experience when you step off of a high box and bounce off of the ground. Depth jumps are such a powerful exercise because they use body weight and gravity to accentuate the forces on the knee joint when you step off of that box and land onto the ground. This is important because the heavier the body weight you are, or the higher the box you are, the greater those forces are going to be, the greater the load is on the body. This is an important consideration because it's a very scalable exercise. It's an exercise that it's very easy to make more or less difficult. If they're unable to handle the forces when they hit the ground on this depth jump, then we just reduce the height of the box. The other thing that we love about depth jumps is that they have a high level of variety within them. So they are an intense exercise, but once we build up to them, we have a significant amount of variability that we can choose within this particular exercise. We can step off of the box and we can bounce off of the ground and we can jump straight up in the air as in a vertical jump. We can bounce off of the ground and jump up to another box. We can bounce off of the ground and land on a single leg to make it more intense. We go from depth jumping to single leg depth jumping. We can step off the box, bounce off of the ground, and jump our way forward or sideways. We can add a significant amount of variability within this exercise that makes it really versatile, and we can continue to up the movement challenge for the athlete as they get fitter and stronger and more elastic. It's also important to note that with depth jumps, when you step off of that box and you bounce off of the ground, you're experiencing loads of up to 5 times body weight when you land on the ground, depending on the weight of the athlete and depending on the height of the box. This is a significant load that we can place on the body with a very simple exercise that's much higher than we can place on the body with traditional strength training exercise like squats or other rehab exercises like leg presses, leg extensions, clamshells, step ups, rear foot elevated split squats, and other more static exercises like those. So why is it so effective? Number 1, it's going to expose the athlete and the knee joint, the whole body really, to realistic sport forces. Number 2, it challenges force acceptance, the ability of the athlete to be able to accept force and redirect it, as in changing direction or jumping and landing. Depth jumps are going to challenge landing mechanics, stiffness, and reactivity. And from a psychological perspective, what I've found is that depth jumps really rebuild confidence in being able to do really hard, intense, dynamic things like jumping off of something really, really high and bouncing off of the ground, which is a significant barrier that ACL rehabs have to get over when they're moving back towards the field. So how do we use them in our program? I usually program run them for very low volumes. And what I mean by that is for a total amount of reps within a workout. And I progress that very, very slowly. And then once we reach a certain amount of volume, say 30 reps or so, that's when I start to introduce higher intensity methods like landing on a single leg or jumping forward instead of jumping up to be able to continue to challenge the athlete at the current volume that we're already at. So I usually start with like 3 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 3 depth jumps off of an 18 to 24 inch box for a total volume of 15 reps. And then we stair step that volume until we get to about 30. The most volume I've done with athletes in a rehabilitation session has been 40 reps, but I think that's overkill. So 40 reps is probably overkill. I like 30 reps as the top end, 3 sets of 10 reps or, 5 sets of 6 reps, whatever that looks like in terms of time. And the higher the box is, the fewer reps I will do per each set. So for example, if we have the athlete jumping off of a 30-inch box, that's a significantly higher intensity and a more potent stimulus than an athlete jumping off of an 18-inch box. So that athlete jumping off of a higher box, I'm going to do fewer reps per set to allow higher quality, number one, and allow more rest in between each set so that they can be really, really explosive and bouncy and elastic and reactive off of the ground. I'm looking for speed off of the ground and I'm looking for violence in their jump. We want to replicate those really, really high forces in a controlled environment like the weight room so that they can feel more comfortable in a chaotic, less controlled environment like the soccer field. So exercise number 2 is the snatch. The snatch is an Olympic style weightlifting variation in which you lift a barbell from the ground straight overhead in one fluid and explosive movement. Now, Olympic weightlifting variations often get a bad rap in the industry. For some reason, there is a controversy surrounding whether or not Olympic weightlifting exercises are vital in strength conditioning. And there's probably 2 poles or 2 schools of thought now in which Olympic weightlifting exercises are the end-all be-all, or Olympic weightlifting exercises like the snatch and the clean are superfluous. You don't need them at all. You can get the same training effects with other exercises. In the weight room with a barbell, the snatch is the ultimate test of coordination and power and the ability to link the lower body and the upper body. It's one of the best bang for your buck exercises that you can do. And in order for you to get up to or to work up to a load or an intensity that's going to create a significant training effect, it takes a little bit of time. But with ACL rehabs, we have time. So why not start from the beginning, teach somebody from the ground up how to do a really powerful exercise like the snatch correctly, and then work their way up throughout the rehab process. So by the end, you have a really fluid athlete in the weight room and a really technically proficient Olympic weightlifter. One of the most beneficial aspects of a lift like the snatch is to be able to link the lower body and the upper body. This coordination between 2 different systems right here, or this linking between the entire body, create a true movement test of coordination and timing and strength that enhances proprioception and power. It's essentially a vertical jump with weight, but now you're linking the upper body in the mix by having to snap the barbell overhead and lock it out as quickly as possible. The other thing that I love about the snatch is that it takes all the major joint systems from the ankle all the way up to the shoulder. So ankle, spine, hips and pelvis, knee joint, feet, ankle complex through a full range of motion. It challenges those joint systems through a full range of motion and places load and stress on each of those joint systems as you complete the lift, especially if you're doing a full snatch. We always start our athletes in hang snatch positions, then we move to power snatch, and then we move to the full snatch. But eventually I want to get them to the point where we're doing full snatches so that we can challenge moving those joint systems through full ranges of motion under load at a high rate of speed. That is more transferable to sport movements, and it's going to get a better training stimulus for the athlete. So similar to the depth jump, I like to keep the volume a little bit lower on the snatch. I typically start with higher volumes when we're teaching the movement. And of course, this is not the type of program in which we are going to put a bunch of load on the barbell and ask you to move it with shit technique from the beginning. With an exercise like the snatch, that exercise is only going to be as effective as the athlete's ability to perform the exercise with technical proficiency. If they can do it well, they're going to get more out of the exercise. So we take a slow cooker approach to this type of exercise. The day one, when an athlete works with us in the weight room, they're going to snatch, but it might be with a PVC pipe or a lighter barbell or a completely empty barbell. And then we're going to teach them the different progressions to get to the point where we're full snatching under a significant amount of load. So in terms of volume recommendations, I like 2 to 6 sets of 1 to 5 reps. So a typical progression might start like, we're going to do 5 sets of 5 reps on day 1, or we may do a total number of reps. Maybe we'll do 30 reps on day 1 in whatever rep scheme we decide. And then we're going to work down towards, maybe we'll get to 3 sets of 3 heavy snatches. That's only 9 reps there, but the load on the barbell is going to be much more significant. So we may only need 9 reps to be able to stress the athlete in the way that I'm trying to stress the athlete. At the beginning, the goal is technical mastery, or technical competency, if you will. I want them to master the positions that I'm requiring of them. I want their joints, their knee joint in particular, to go through a full range of motion. I want them to feel capable of dropping under a load very, very quickly and catching it just as quickly. And I want them to be able to feel stable, as in they're not collapsing in on themselves when they catch that heavy barbell overhead. Exercise number 3 is the full squat. Now, squatting should seem like a no-brainer when you are trying to strengthen the knee joint and the quads during an ACL reconditioning protocol. However, we have a different set of standards when we're talking about the full squat here. The first part of that standard is that we always squat heels elevated. And the reason why is we're trying to circumvent or work around some of the ankle mobility issues so that we can work back to full flexion at that knee joint. What I'm looking for in terms of standards with the full squat is for an athlete to smash their hamstrings on their calf muscles and sit their hips directly down on their heels with their heels on the ground with as much of an upright torso as possible. Right? So the way we do that is we get athletes to front squat or goblet squat at the very beginning, and we elevate their heels. So load in the front and their heels elevated will create better physics for them to achieve the depth necessary to get the work and the stimulus that we need to grow those quads and strengthen that knee joint in flexion in particular. Now, this is the first exercise right here that I'm demanding that an athlete do heavy. I want lots of intensity on this squat right here, and that's because the squat serves a couple of purposes. The first thing that the squat does for us is to test for knee flexion range of motion. If we have a functional knee after ACL surgery and we have full range of motion, then an athlete should be able to squat past parallel, past 90 degrees, and put their hamstrings on their calves with minimal restriction and little pain. At the beginning, this won't be the case. We're going to work down to this position over the course of many months. Eventually, we're going to do it under load, and stretching under load is one of the best ways to regain range of motion because we're telling the nervous system that it's okay to access these extreme joint ranges of motion. It's safe to do so under load. So the squat is valuable, or the full squat is valuable, because it tests knee flexion range of motion. The second thing is that it's going to be the best quad builder in terms of quad strength. It's no doubt that the squat, amongst all the exercises on this list, has the highest loading potential, especially if you use an implement like the barbell or a safety squat bar. With an exercise like this, we want to load the athlete heavy so we can have lots of absolute or relative strength. The athlete has to build strength, and there has to be mechanical tension in the form of load on the quad muscle or on the leg muscles in general in order for them to gain back quad size, but also strengthen the supporting musculature in the front that's going to help with deceleration activities that are going to be helpful for getting the athlete back into change of direction activities later in the reconditioning process. The other thing that's valuable about full depth squatting is that they're going to place a significant load on the tendons as well. Because this is the exercise with the highest loading potential and tendons love high loads, this exercise in particular is going to be key for creating healthy patellar tendons as we go through the rehab process. Lastly, because a squat has a high loading potential and exercises like back squats place a significant amount of total load on the entire athlete, especially when you go through full ranges of motion because the amount of work that you're doing is greater, there's going to be an excellent hormonal response that comes after training that's going to be beneficial for recovery, but also muscle growth and strength across the board in every quality for the athlete. So how do we program it? We typically program 2 to 6 sets of 1 to 8 reps. Now this is a significant range right here, but most of the time we're going to start with higher volumes and we're going to work towards lower volumes with higher intensities. It's important to note that in the rehab process, volume can sometimes be the enemy. If an athlete is doing a significant amount of volume, there's going to be a lot of stress and wear and tear on the patellar tendons, the knee joint, and the muscles in general. There's going to be a lot of damage there. And when we perform strength training activities, at least in the short term, acutely, we are creating damage to the muscles in a way that hampers proprioception. So we're damaging proprioception in the short term. Now, this may may be a good thing in the long term because we want to create stress on the athlete so they can get stronger and build bigger muscles in the long term. However, when we're also responsible for doing activities on the field like sprinting, plyometrics, and change of direction, we need all of that proprioception that we can get so we can execute those activities with a high level of coordination. So high volumes of strength training are not always the best for athletes. I always err on the side of lower volume with higher intensities, meaning higher loads, so that we can get the strength aspect and the nervous system training without too much damage to the musculature and too much damage to proprioception in a way that it hampers their ability to sprint or train the next day. So, moral of the story, don't be scared to go deep. Squat heavy, squat deep, watch those leg muscles grow, and watch your total body strength go up. Exercise number 4 is the Romanian deadlift, or the RDL. Now, this exercise is so vital for creating balance on the opposite side of the body than the full squat. If we think of the squat as a total leg developer, it's going to focus more on the quadriceps or the front side of the body. Now we need something to create balance along the backside because having a good hamstring to quadricep strength ratio is going to be a protective factor for re-injury in the future. We need really, really strong hamstrings. But because the hamstrings are what we call a biarticular muscle, meaning they cross at 2 different joints, the hips and the knee, we have to train them as such. And the barbell RDL is one of the best ways to do that. The barbell RDL is so effective because it trains the hamstrings at full length with high loads. There's a significant amount of tension on the hamstring muscles as you lower that barbell to the bottom position. The hamstrings are part of a set of muscles called the posterior chain. Everything that happens, or all those muscles, really important muscles that are located on the back side of the body, from the upper back, the muscles between your shoulder blades, to the lower back, your lumbar spine, your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, your deep calves, your gastrocs, and your Achilles tendon. Everything that happens along the backside of the body is going to be very important for balance, number 1, and even more importantly for propulsion, for moving you forward. The hamstring is arguably the most important exercise for sprinting. So the barbell RDL helps us create balance, but also creates long and strong hamstrings for sprinting, which in our ACL reconditioning program is the most vital exercise and the number 1 priority for getting athletes back to the soccer field. It's important to note that the barbell RDL is different than the deadlift. The deadlift, the barbell starts from a dead stop on the floor. Not a bad exercise, but the RDL is going to start at the hip and it's going to be initiated with a hips back movement, and you're going to lengthen the hamstrings at the start of the movement. And I think this is very important because, like I said before, with the depth jump, we're looking for a significant amount of load when we're stretching the muscle on the way down, the eccentric portion of the exercise. The other thing that I love about this exercise is it builds hamstring range of motion, particularly if you're doing RDLs in which the barbell is moving all the way down towards the shoelaces, and the RDL has a significant amount of variation that we can place in it. So we can start with 2-legged RDLs or bilateral RDLs with 2 feet on the ground, get really proficient at those, and then we can make them more difficult and increase the load on a single leg by doing single leg RDLs and other variations. These are kind of a nasty exercise too because this exercise produces a significant amount of soreness, and that's because there's a lot of mechanical tension on the hamstring when we perform them. Therefore, I like lower volumes and higher intensities on this one as well. Start with 2 to 4 sets of 3 to 10 reps, focusing on full stretch at the bottom and speed on the way back up towards the hip. The closer the barbell stays to the body, the more hamstrings you will feel at full stretch. If you do barbell RDLs with correct technique at full stretch with heavy loads, you're going to feel like your hamstrings are ripping off the bone the next day. But that's okay. Soreness is an indicator that work was done. It's not a bad thing. It's just a signal. And moving on to our last exercise, exercise number 5. These are heavy unilateral exercises, such as rear foot elevated split squats or reverse lunges or single leg squats. Now, you might be thinking, oh, we already have a full squat on the list, but that was a double leg squat. It's going to be a little bit different. One of these squatting variations is going to improve a quality that we call absolute strength, or our ability to move as much load as possible. The other exercise is going to help stress musculature in our leg that is often neglected. Things like our glute medius, our side butt, our adductors, our groin, and the other smaller muscles in our hamstrings that often get neglected when we do bilateral exercises like squatting and barbell RDLs. So unilateral exercises create a 360-degree wraparound insurance policy to ensure that every single muscle in the legs that is protective of the ACL joint is getting trained. Now, unilateral exercises are kind of nasty sometimes because they expose a lot of weaknesses, not just from a balance perspective, but from a symmetry perspective. You probably understand that if you're in physical therapy for your ACL, limb symmetry is extremely important. Unilateral exercises are an excellent way to ensure that your left leg strength and your right leg strength are as similar as possible. Also, heavy unilateral training, or training heavy on one leg, is the best balance training and proprioceptive training we can probably do in the weight room. We don't need fancy Bosu balls or lights or tricks or juggling or anything like that. We can do heavy single leg exercises, and all of the stabilizers of our legs, as well as our central nervous system, will light up like a Christmas tree. An important consideration is that an extremely dynamic sport like soccer, most of the patterns of the sport are performed on one leg, jumping off of one leg, cutting on one leg, sprinting, running. They're done by bouncing from leg to leg. So unilateral strength and symmetry is going to be incredibly important and translatable to the dynamic movements of the sport. Exercises like your glute medius and your adductors are often neglected in bilateral training or leg training in general. With heavy unilateral exercises, we can really work on the internal rotation and external rotation capabilities of your legs and your pelvic health and the strength of those supportive stabilizing muscles to make sure everything is touched in the training program. This is typically an exercise where we could do a little bit more volume on because we're doing left leg and right leg. I like 2 to 4 sets of 3 to 10 reps, 2 to 4 sets of 3 to 8 reps on each leg. And I wouldn't shy away from heavier loads on this just because there's a balance issue. We typically start with body weight exercises on unilateral variations like reverse lunges and Bulgarian split squats. And then once an athlete has the appropriate balance, then we load them quickly because I want to challenge that balance and proprioception, and I want them really strong on one leg. It's an excellent way to promote left leg to right leg balance if we get strong on each leg. Oftentimes, the heavy loading is saved just for bilateral variations because it's deemed to be safer. But in a proper ACL reconditioning program, unilateral exercises should be done very, very heavy as well. And by this time, you're probably noticing a trend here, which is that every exercise that I chose on this list must be loaded to the appropriate degree to create stress on the athlete's knee joint and the surrounding muscles. This is important because training is designed to prepare us for competition. If the training is not heavy or intense, then the forces on those muscles or the forces that those muscles experience in training is not going to translate to the forces that they're going to experience in the game. Some examples of heavy unilateral exercises include Bulgarian split squats, reverse lunges, single leg squats, and lateral lunges. So you can take that segment that I just said, and you could place it right before I talked about sets and reps. Just as a little gift, because I'm a generous guy, I'm going to give you one bonus exercise. You thought it was just 5, but I'm giving you 6. So the 6th exercise that I'd like to add to this list is a reverse sled drag. Now, we talked about this earlier in the video, but there are some protective factors for ensuring that re-injury is less likely. One of those protective factors for athletes is leg strength, symmetry, left leg to right leg. One of the other protective factors is size, so quad size in particular. The left quad and the right quad should be of similar muscle girths and sizes to ensure that there's enough muscle mass to protect that knee joint when it's experiencing significantly high forces. So how do we put quad size on an athlete without creating so much soreness that they are unable to do anything in training the next day or two? Enter the reverse sled drag, a nasty little exercise in which you load a sled very heavy and you walk backwards with it for time. There's a couple of reasons why I love this exercise. The first one is that you can load it heavy. So psychologically, it gives the athlete the perception that they are moving a significant amount of load and they're getting strong again. Number 2, it's an excellent cardiorespiratory workout. It challenges the heart and the lungs at the same time as building local muscular endurance in the quads. Number 3 is it's good for range of motion. It helps work on knee flexion and extension, particularly terminal knee extension, which is an incredibly important factor in the rehab process when we're trying to get back to running. Number 4, and arguably the most important, because you're just pushing and we're not loading heavy like other exercises on this list, there's not as much eccentric stress. So it doesn't produce as much soreness as the other exercises on this list. And that's a good thing. We can do more of it. We could do more volume on it so that we could experience and reap the rewards of the type of exercise that it is. So typically we like to perform this exercise for time. I usually start with like a 5-minute block of continuous sled dragging. And we load up a heavy sled, something that's challenging but movable, and have the athlete pull it backwards for time. 5 minutes, as many trips as they can make without stopping. It's not supposed to be a sprint, but it's deliberate moderate and slow, focusing on terminal knee extension with every single foot contact. The exercise has a happy side effect of producing that quad size and girth that we were talking about if you do it with enough volume and for a long enough time in the rehab program, but also in the moment, it produces a nice pump in the quad. It gets that blood flow to the area. So if an athlete is having some patellar issues or just general pain and swelling in that area, it might feel better in the short term. So this is an excellent exercise if you're a coach and you're having an athlete with some knee pain in the front of their knees, some patellar tendon aggravation. You can do this exercise to help them feel better acutely. If we work up to these 5 or 6 exercises right here and use a smart progression to get there, it's highly likely that you're going to be competent enough in strength and coordination to be able to do really intense stuff on the field, which is what is really going to get us back into the competitive arena quicker. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, or if you want more information about the details of our ACL reconditioning process, hit the link in the description and you can book a free ACL consultation. See you next time.